So let's talk about music. Hello and welcome again. It's a very musical novel, of course, and Wagner's leitmotif system certainly influenced the composition of the novel, and Mann himself noticed it. Uh, these leitmotifs are called migraine, an emerald green butterfly, the Little Mermaid from Andersen's fairy tale, and others. They go through the entire novel and gaining new meanings, acting in different contexts, but still maintaining their single symbolic meaning. Elements of the fugue. A fugue is a multi-voiced piece of music in which the main theme is presented in turn by all voices, and these voices are absolutely independent. Here is the theme of the demonic, which sounds in the images of Adrian. Then Kretschmer, Kumpf, Schleppfuß, Rudolf Schwertfeger, Clarissa Nesser-Rode, Serenus as a person who discusses it, Nepomuk as a victim of the demonic, and of course the main character, Adrian Leverkühn. Counterpoint, there is a parallel development of two opposite themes and their intersection at the end. For example, Leverkühn, Serenus, Leverkühn, Marie Godot, Leverkühn, Nepomuk, and the novel time is built on the principle of counterpoint. It is divided into two streams that coexist not sequentially, as in the historical continuum, but simultaneously, as in a certain spiritual space of human consciousness, maybe. This is the time of Leverkühn, 30 years old, and the time of Serenus, the time of writing the novel, it's 40 years of 20th century. The method of disharmony and dissonance, characteristic of modernist music, is reflected in the fragmentary style of narration, jumping and running ahead in the story of Zeitblom. If the soul is absent, as Serenus says, God is also rendered unnecessary. Piety, spiritual nobility and religiosity are possible only in relation to man and through man, only within the limits of the earthly and human. Their fruit should be, perhaps will be, a religious humanism defined by a sense of the transcendent mystery of man, a proud consciousness that he is not just a biological being, that he belongs to the spiritual world as a crucial part of his being, that he is given the absolute, the idea of truth, freedom, justice, that he is charged with the duty to approach perfection. God is in this pathos, in this duty, in this piety of man before himself. In hundreds of billions of galaxies, I don't see it. This is how Zeitblom comments on Leverkühn's cosmic reasoning and music, by the way. And Adrian calls Zeitblom's humanistic position the purest Middle Ages. And in this mood, Adrian creates his musical poem, which he calls The Wonders of the Universe. The quintessence of the 30-minute orchestral portrait of the world is mockery, a mockery of man as a species, which Leverkusen, in conversation with Zeitblom, calls the flower of evil. We can see Baudelaire's allusion or image. Yeah, the impetus for the creation of the apocalypse was 16 woodcuts by Dürer, 1511 a year, illustrating the revelation of John the Theologian. And Leverkusen, in the process of creativity, gets acquainted with early Christian and medieval narratives about the visions of saints and various eschatological experiences. In Leverkusen's work, the text of New Testament was combined with the Old Testament prophecies, the Lament of Ezekiel, the Lamentations of Jeremiah, the verses of the Psalter, and the stories of the Apocrypha. All this together was supposed to create a general impression of another world opening up, of the final reckoning, of going to hell. In his work, The Apocalypse, Adrian turned to the pre-Bach form of the fugue, combining the archaic and experimental innovative. This is one of the essence features of modernist poetics. It was an all-new revolutionary archaic world where the values associated with the idea of individualism, such as truth, freedom, law, reason, completely lost their force, were cancelled. Leverkusen's Apocalypse becomes a direct illustration of the idea of Kretschmer and so on, Nietzsche of course, which sounded at the beginning of the story about the connection between aestheticism and barbarism. In the oratorio, the anti-human beginning has found a bold but also terrible musical embodiment. This is the theme of howling. These sounds make the screen crawl, says Zeitblom. By the most amazing application of the glissando to the human voice, a return to a primitive state in a terrible core apocalypse. On the removal of the seventh seal, the darkening of the sun, bleeding moon, the ships breaking with landfill screaming people. The logic of thematic development in Beethoven was more than once associated with the dialectical development of Hegel's thought and Hegel's philosophy, of course. Despite the fact that Beethoven used polyphony in his music, in his works, the principles of his thinking are undoubtedly based on the development and interaction of contrasting elements or themes, which often represent sharp, irreconcilable contradictions. The development of the sonate allegro is based on dialectical principles. The development of the allegro in sonates form is based on dialectical principles, and this method of musical thinking is present even in entirely polyphonic music. Polyphonic works such as, for example, the Great Fugue for string quartet opus 133. Already the beginning of this fugue is a presentation of two absolutely contrary beginnings, a heavy measure tread in syncopation and dotted theme that seeks to overcome this measure. Seeks to break out of it. Even in the thoroughly polyphonic parts, of the sonata symphony cycle. For example, in the second part of the ninth symphony, or in final of the ninth symphony, the themes of the fugue contrast with each other. Of course, the final here in 19th century is the result of his own philosophical views, Beethoven's own philosophical views, and a certain cross-section of the era, a reflection of the ideals of the Enlightenment, the great French bourgeois revolution, and the thoughts of contemporary philosophers, French Revolution, 1789. But Adrian wants to select the Ninth Symphony, as he says, and dissolve it. At the moment of Nepomuk's illness and death, in despair, he declares that there should be no good and noble what people fought and died for on the barricades. So, Adrian Leverkühn re-evaluates all musical and ideological values and comes to the paradoxical idea that freedom breeds infertility of talent. Despite the fact that it is to identify creative forces that freedom is called, however, freedom is a synonym for subjectivity, and the latter one day becomes unbearable to itself. In addition, freedom is always formed to a dialectical transition to its opposite. It's on page 212 in my edition. So, the lament or lamentation of Dr. Faustus was a variation of one theme, is musical oratorium of Leverkühn, the last musical oratorium. So, this variation of one theme, without dynamics, without drama, like a concentric circles from a stone thrown into water, which one in another spread further and further, still remaining circles. In this way, the extreme expression is arranged almost mathematically, precisely, and resembles the magic square that once hung in Adrian's room, where the sum of the numbers on all sides was the same. In whatever order they were placed, it also creates an extreme variety of sound combinations from the same unchanging material, so that there is nothing non-mathematical, nothing that is not a variation of the same. The grandiose lamentation of Faustus in Leverkühn's cantata is diametrically opposed to the exaltation in the final of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, written to Schiller's poem Ode to Joy. The Ninth Symphony becomes in the novel a symbol of the humanistic art of the past, and even more so the idea of God and faith in God. Adrian, in my opinion, through negation and anti-humanistic pathos, still in his own way asserts a new humanism, since his soul was animated by love.